Thank you, Senator Griff.
Thank you.
Oh, there you are. Sorry,
Yes,
Senator
here I am.
Anderson. I look for you over there.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Deputy President. It's my great pleasure to rise and speak on the Aged Care Legislation Amendment Financial Transparency Bill 2020. Madam Deputy President, looking after our senior citizens is one of the most important responsibilities we have as a nation. The Morrison government's track record in continually improving aged care is extensive. And we are very proud of many of our key initiatives. Of course, many of them have been incorporated into the 2021 budget. And before I outline those and speak about the details of this bill, I just want to take issue with Senator Griff and the comments he made about aged care being centred around transactions and not care. And I know Senator Griff does come into the Senate with a lot of good intentions, but I really do take issue with that, Madam Deputy President, because so many aged care providers, residential aged care providers, do an incredible job. And I don't want to stand here and allow the misdeeds of a number of residential providers who are not doing the right thing to cast aspersions on the sector as a whole. So I do want to reject the premise on which Senator Griff made that comment. Of course, Madam Deputy President, under our budget we've provided $1.6 billion more for another 23 home care packages. This builds on the $325 million investment for 6,000 or so packages announced by the Prime Minister on the 8th of July 2020. There's another $11 million to ensure ongoing face-to-face video and telephone interventions for psychosocial support through the Dementia Behaviour Management Advisory Service and Severe Behaviour Response Teams. There's just over $10 million over 3 years to support the recently established Aged Care Workforce Industry Council to take a major role in implementing the 14 strategic actions outlined in A Matter of Care, Australia's Aged Care Workforce Strategy. There's $10.6 million over 3 years to establish a national network of system coordinators to help younger people find age-appropriate accommodation which supports them to live independently in the community. There's $91.6 million over 2 years to support potential implementation of the Australian National Aged Care Classification funding model in residential aged care. This funding builds on previous investments of $167 million announced in the July Economic and Fiscal Update to continue to improve the aged care funding model, bringing the total investment to some $258 million. In the budget also, $35.6 million over 2 years for the Business Improvement Fund, which provides targeted grant-based assistance to residential aged care providers experiencing viability concerns, and that is a key issue of the sector. $125.3 million for the replacement of the Commonwealth Continuity of Support to the Commonwealth Disability Support for Older Australians program, and that's to continue to support older people with a disability who are not eligible under the NDIS. And there's also $4.6 million to expand the single in-home support program to support older people remain in their homes. So a huge raft of investments in aged care that have just been announced in our most recent budget. And of course, Madam Deputy President, every year under the Morrison government, home care packages are up, residential care places are up, and every single year aged care funding goes up. The Morrison government, and these are the facts, is delivering record investment across the aged care system over the forward estimates from $13.3 billion in 2012-13 under the previous Labor government, growing to $21.3 billion in 2019-20, and we estimate that funding for aged care will grow to more than $27 billion in the years 23-24. So that is on average $1.1 billion of extra support for older Australians each year over the forward estimates. The government spent over $13.4 billion in 1920 on residential care, up from $9.2 billion in 2012-13, and in 23-24 the years 23-24, this will grow to over $17.1 billion. So we are seeing massive increases in investment by our government. And I will make this point, this really important point: making improvements to aged care for all senior Australians continues to be one of the Morrison government's most important priorities. And that is precisely why the Prime Minister called a Royal Commission into aged care quality and safety. And that is precisely why we are acting. As Commissioner Briggs stated as part of the final hearings of the Royal Commission, I have, however, detected over the last year, Council, a growing determination among officials and in the government to fix the problems of the aged care system and to pursue a genuine reform agenda. And, Madam Deputy President, we are committed to providing that genuine reform agenda, to providing senior Australians with support to live in their homes longer. New home care packages have increased from 60,000 under Labor in 2012-13 to 185,000 in 23-24, an increase of 208%. Over the same period, funding will increase by 302% due to growth in high-level packages. And what is in stark contrast is that at the last election, Labor provided no additional funding in their costings for home care places or any additional funding for aged quality, workforce or residential aged care. So it's pretty rich for those opposite to stand up on aged care, and I don't include Senator Griff, who's sitting opposite me at the moment, but for Labor senators to stand up, and members in the other place, when Labor so failed Australians at the last election. In fact, in the opposition leader's budget reply speech, Mr Albanese's reply speech, just a few months ago, aged care did not even get a mention in the entire half-an-hour budget reply speech. That is really shameful on the Labor Party. I make that very strong point. And of course, this year has been a year like no other, Madam Deputy President. The COVID-19 response, of course, has been incredibly challenging, and since the beginning of the pandemic, our government has invested more than $1.6 billion specifically to deal with the response to the pandemic. And this includes boosting quality and safety monitoring, support for retaining the care workforce, providing an additional surge workforce, assistance to the sector with additional costs, providing resources to COVID-19 impacted facilities, and funding, of course, more Australians to stay at home. And of course, as we know, we had a very serious situation in Victoria as a result of the hotel quarantine program, which allowed community transmission of the virus to run out of control. And there was and of course, as we always knew, if that happened, it would get into the most vulnerable of the community, aged care homes, and as a result, extra funding was also delivered for a Victorian aged care response centre. So I want to turn to the bill before the Senate today, which proposes amendments to the Aged Care Act and the Corporations Act, which would have the effect of requiring that aged care providers report certain financial and cost information to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commissioner, including income and subsidies received from care and the amount spent on staff. It also provides that the Commissioner will publish reports received from providers, and if an approved provider received more than $10 million in Commonwealth funding in a financial year, greater financial reporting requirements under the Corporations Act. I will make the first point in response as to why the government is not supporting this bill. The usefulness of the proposed public information is not clear because it has the potential to be misleading to consumers. For example, in some instances, there may be reasons why the itemised cost of medical products and continence aids, as an example, would vary between residential aged care services, such that the information would not assist transparency for consumers necessarily. The amendments are also not supported by the government as they, and this is a really important point, as they preempt the final report of the Royal Commission into aged care quality and safety, which is due in February of next year. The Royal Commission has been critical of constant change and moving targets in its interim report, and embracing these proposals or amendments on their own in a piecemeal fashion would not reflect the importance of the government ensuring that our reforms are integrated, cohesive and solutions-driven. We don't want to preempt the Royal Commission. That would be most inappropriate, and the reforms at their heart, as we recognise, must deliver the best care for all senior Australians, and that's got to be, without exception, putting the care of seniors at the centre. And if we do so in a piecemeal way, we may in fact err in not addressing other really important issues in relation to transparency. Senator Griff's proposed amendments also raise issues for the fiscal impact on the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, and while not directly relevant to Parliament's consideration of Senator Griff's proposed amendments, the Australian Government does need to be cognisant of these issues. While no costing of the resourcing implications has occurred at this stage, the proposed amendments are likely to have resource implications in the form of report collection activity. This will require additional staff and/or IT systems, resources to collect the required reports from providers. There'll also be, we expect, additional costs in compliance and enforcement activity to respond to providers that fail to report by the required time frame or who give an inadequate report to the Commissioner. There'll also be report publishing activity costs. This will also require additional staff and/or IT systems resources to publish these reports, whether they are on the Commission's website or on My Aged Care. And there's also a resources issue in relation to data incorporation activity. So further resources would be required to build these reports into the Commission's risk profiling IT systems. There are also, and I do want to say already that there are very important existing requirements for aged care providers to report annual financial information under the Aged Care Act. This requirement includes the provision that all aged care providers are to provide an aged care financial report, the ACFR, to the Secretary of the Department of Health. Within the residential income and expenditure statement, providers are already required to report on the sources of the funds they receive. That's from the Commonwealth, the state, residential, from the residents themselves and other sources, and then explain how these funds were expended against the categories of care: accommodation, hotel expenses, so things like catering and cleaning, administration, finances, and other non-operational expenditure. There's also the requirement that all residential aged care providers must give an aged care prudential compliance statement to the Secretary, and all non-government residential aged care providers must provide an independently audited general purpose financial report prepared in accordance with accounting standards, as if the approved provider is a distinct reporting entity. The Department is currently working to expand the requirements of the ACFR and expects revised reporting requirements will be in place from the 1st of July 2021, so it's important to know that that work is underway. The revised requirements will introduce more transparency around the operational results of the facilities that a particular provider operates. This expansion will cover some of the additional reporting requirements proposed under Section 92A(2) of the bill, as well as new information related to parent entity finances, and the Department will also undertake sector consultation before these requirements are introduced. So all of these changes are being considered in terms of the Royal Commission and the Prudential Standards Review to ensure they are integrated with other reforms and they have the potential, of course, we recognise the potential for increased administrative burden, and these matters do need to be appropriately balanced. So, Madam Acting Deputy President, we're very proud of the support our government is providing, including in these important reforms, but we await the final results of the Royal
Thank you, Senator
Commission.
Henderson.
Thank you.
Senator Polley.